Hello, I never thought it would come to this. My own mother changed the locks and told me I had no home. Just like that. But that wasn't the worst part. The real shock came when I realized how far she'd gone to steal everything from me. The betrayal? It's not just about a house, it's about a lifetime of lies I never saw coming. My own family, my own blood. But what I did next? You won't believe it. Stay tuned and find out what happens when I take half the house, legally. It was 11:27 p.m. when the message came through, glowing faintly in the dark, quiet apartment. I was curled up on the couch, the soft hum of the refrigerator my only company, when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it might be a late-night email from work or a text from an old friend checking in. I didn't expect it to be from my mother. "We've changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now." My hand froze mid-reach as I stared at the words on the screen. The words felt like a punch to the gut. I read them again, trying to make sense of what they meant. They couldn't be real, could they? My heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out across my skin. But no, there it was, right in front of me, so final, so cold. I didn't respond right away. My hand hovered above the phone, caught in the weight of it. My mind was spinning, trying to process the message, to find some logical explanation that could make sense of what had just been delivered. The anger started to build, but so did the confusion. Why? Why would she do this to me? After everything I'd done, after everything I'd sacrificed. It didn't make sense. But as much as I tried to understand, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered the truth. They'd never seen me as anything more than someone who was always there to clean up the mess, to shoulder the burden, to never ask for anything in return. I set the phone down on the coffee table and sat back. My eyes scanned the empty apartment, its familiar silence suddenly feeling foreign. The walls felt closer now. The place I had come to call my home suddenly didn't belong to me anymore. I was being kicked out, without warning, without explanation. The sting of betrayal cut deeper than I thought it would. As I sat there, the room around me blurred. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, my chest tightening with each breath. It was late, but sleep was a distant memory. My mind raced through memories I had buried long ago, memories of the years I spent living in my family's shadow, doing what was expected of me without complaint. I had spent my childhood in the background, always the one who picked up after everyone else. My sister, Serafina, was the golden child. She was the one they doted on, the one they celebrated, the one they expected to do great things. And I was just there, cleaning up after their messes. My parents never asked what I wanted, never cared about my needs. They never saw me as anything other than a tool for their convenience. But all those years of sacrifice had never earned me anything. Not even a simple acknowledgement. It had only earned me rejection. I stood up, pacing across the room. The anger inside me swelled, burning hotter, feeding off the betrayal. Why had I been expected to sacrifice so much, only to be tossed aside when they no longer had any use for me? Why hadn't I ever stood up for myself before? How had I let it go on for so long? I walked to the window, the night air cool against my skin as I looked out over the city of Portland. The city that had always been my home, but now felt more like a distant memory. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't just stand by and let them get away with it. I wasn't going to let this be the end of it. Not after everything I had been through. Not after everything I had given them. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Sitting at my kitchen table, my phone pressed to my ear, I explained the situation. I told him about my years of living in the house, the countless hours I had spent fixing up rooms, painting walls, paying bills, contributing in ways that made me feel like I had a stake in that place. But, as it turned out, my name wasn't on the deed. The house wasn't legally mine, not by any means. But the lawyer explained that I might have a case. The years of financial support I'd given, the improvements I had made, these things might work in my favor. It wasn't guaranteed, but there was a chance. A chance to fight back. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. I spent the rest of the day gathering documents, receipts, emails, anything I could find that might help my case. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. I wasn't going to let them erase me from their lives so easily. As the hours passed, I became more focused, more determined. My initial shock had turned to anger, but now, it was something else. It was clarity. I had a path forward, a way to fight back. And I was going to take it. The next step would be the hardest one. I would need to take legal action. But I was ready. Ready to reclaim what was mine. The betrayal stung, but it had also sharpened something inside me. I wasn't going to sit back and let this happen. I was going to take control, no matter how long it took. The next morning, I woke up to the harsh reality of what had happened the night before. The message from my mother still lingered in my mind, the words echoing in my head like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. I hadn't slept a wink. How could I, knowing what I now knew? How could I lie down and close my eyes after that betrayal? But the worst part? It wasn't just the locks. It was the finality of it, the coldness of it all. I couldn't sit around and wait to figure out how to fix this. I had to act. The decision to fight for what was mine wasn't just about a house, it was about dignity, respect, and finally taking control of my life after all these years of giving everything to my family without ever asking for anything in return. I grabbed my phone. It was time to make the call. The lawyer's office was only a few blocks away from my apartment. I had passed it countless times, always too busy with work or life to give it much thought. But now, I couldn't ignore it. The building felt imposing as I stood outside for a moment before walking in, the air outside cold and sharp against my skin. Jordan, the lawyer, was a no-nonsense kind of guy. I liked him immediately. His office was sleek and minimalist, but not in a way that made me feel out of place. We got straight to business. As I explained the situation, the events of the past 24 hours rushed through me again, the hurt, the anger, the disbelief. But Jordan was calm, taking it all in, asking the right questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together as he thought for a moment. "You've got a case," he said simply. "It's not a slam dunk, but it's not nothing either. You've contributed, financially, physically, over the years. It gives you a legal claim to that property." I let his words settle into my mind. Legal claim. That was the first real piece of hope I'd had since receiving that damn text. I wasn't just fighting to get my things back. I was fighting for my place in this family, for the years I'd sacrificed, for all the things I'd given without question. "I'll need to see your receipts, bank statements, anything that shows you've contributed," Jordan continued, snapping me back to the moment. "It'll take time, but we'll get it." I left his office feeling a mixture of emotions. Hope, yes, but also fear. Fear of what this would cost me, financially, emotionally. But I couldn't stop now. I wouldn't stop. The truth was, I had been waiting for an opportunity like this my whole life, waiting for a chance to stand up for myself, to claim what was mine. Back at my apartment, I started sorting through the mess of papers I had kept over the years. I dug out receipts for home repairs, bank transfers, and the countless bills I'd paid that had never been acknowledged. Every document, every piece of paper, felt like a confirmation of my past sacrifice. The house wasn't just a building to me, it was my work, my blood, my time. The more I dug through the papers, the more angry I became. My parents had never acknowledged any of this. They had never once said thank you. They had never shown appreciation for everything I'd done. And yet, there they were, locking me out of the very place I had helped build. I knew then that this wasn't just about getting my property back. It was about fighting for my dignity. It was about making sure they understood what they had done. The next step was clear. I was going to fight. And I wasn't going to back down. The phone rang. It was Serafina. I almost didn't answer it, but I had to. "Hey, how are you?" she asked, her voice light, carefree, as if everything was normal. As if I hadn't just been thrown out of the family home. "I'm fine," I said, my voice tight. "Actually, I'm not fine. I'm not fine at all." She paused, and I could hear her shuffling around on the other end of the line. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Mom and Dad changed the locks. I don't have a place to stay anymore." There was silence. Then, a soft, almost hesitant, "What?" "They kicked me out, Serafina. They've taken everything from me. All these years, all the work, all the sacrifice, and now, they're throwing me out like I never mattered." I didn't know, she stammered, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. I could hear the uncertainty. "Are you sure it's really that bad?" Maybe there's been a misunderstanding? There's no misunderstanding, I snapped. They did it on purpose. And now, I'm going to make them pay for it. I'm sorry, she whispered, but it felt hollow. I hung up before she could say anything else. I couldn't deal with her right now. The last thing I needed was to hear her excuses, her apologies. She had always been their favorite, and no matter how hard I tried, I would never be able to change that. I spent the rest of the day buried in paperwork. I gathered receipts, transferred bank statements, and pieced together the story of my life, my contributions, my sacrifices. Every piece of evidence felt like a small victory, a reminder that I had earned the right to fight for what was mine. But as the night fell, something inside me shifted. The anger, the frustration, they hadn't gone away, but they had evolved. They had become something sharper, something clearer. This wasn't just about reclaiming a house. This was about taking back my life. The phone rang again, but this time, it wasn't Serafina. It was my mother. Delilah, we've been trying to reach you. Her voice was cold, almost indifferent. You need to come home. We need to talk. Home? I repeated bitterly. You mean the house you just locked me out of? I know you're upset, she said, her voice softening, but there was no sincerity in it. We can work this out, just come home. Please. I laughed, a bitter, humorless laugh. You don't get to pretend like nothing happened. You don't get to take everything from me and then ask me to come back like nothing's wrong. There was a pause on the other end of the line before she spoke again, her tone sharp. You're making a mistake, Delilah. You don't want to go down this road. And with that, she hung up. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone, my fingers gripping it so tightly I thought it might break. I had made my decision. There was no going back. This fight had already begun, and I wasn't about to lose it. The courtroom felt colder than I expected, the air thick with tension. I was nervous, no denying that, but there was something else too, something that I hadn't expected. A quiet, determined anger that had been simmering for days was now boiling over. As I walked through the doors, I didn't just feel like a daughter who had been wronged. I felt like a warrior stepping onto the battlefield for something that was mine. I had no intention of backing down. The first hearing wasn't what I'd imagined. I'd expected it to be a formality, a simple step in what would be a long legal process. Instead, the moment I walked in, I realized how much was on the line. My parents' lawyer, well-dressed, smug, was there, ready to fight tooth and nail to keep me from what was rightfully mine. My stomach tightened as I took a seat, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. For the first time in my life, I was facing them not as their daughter but as their adversary. I tried to keep my composure, but my mind was spinning. I could hear the lawyer's voice as he stood up to argue his case, speaking with calm authority. He didn't know what he was up against. He didn't know what I'd been through. He didn't know the years of sacrifice, of being the quiet worker behind the scenes. To him, I was just a daughter, making an unreasonable claim. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. The hearing didn't go as planned. Not at all. The lawyer's first move was to undermine me, to paint me as the ungrateful child who simply wanted to take advantage of my family's generosity. The argument was slick, too slick, but it was full of holes. As he spoke, I felt a lump form in my throat, a mix of disbelief and frustration. Was this what they thought of me? That I was just someone trying to take from them? I could feel my heart racing, but I stayed still. I had to. I was learning how to control my emotions, to play the game. But inside, everything was boiling over. This wasn't just about a house. This was about everything, every moment I'd given to this family, every sacrifice I'd made, and now, this stranger was calling me greedy. How dare he? Objection, I heard myself say before I could stop it. My voice was sharp, cutting through the lawyer's words. The judge turned to look at me, a look of curiosity in his eyes. My parents' lawyer didn't even flinch. He wasn't intimidated by me, and that pissed me off even more. I was being ignored, just like always. I stood up, my hands shaking but my mind clear. I've given my entire life to this family. I've worked hard, paid bills, fixed that house from the ground up, and now they want to act like I have no right to any of it? I paused, letting the words sink in. You're not going to get away with this. Not this time. The courtroom fell silent. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, my mother's face turning red. My father kept his gaze fixed forward, trying to look as if none of this affected him. But I knew better. They were both guilty, and now the world would see it. The defense lawyer stepped forward, a smirk on his face. Your Honor, this is a classic case of an emotional appeal. Miss Monroe's claim is based on sentiment, not law. She feels entitled to the family home, but there's no legal basis for her claim. I felt my anger flare. It was like he was dismissing everything I had worked for, reducing it to nothing more than an emotional outburst. This isn't about sentiment, I said, my voice firm. It's about years of financial contributions, labor, and sacrifice. I'm not asking for anything I haven't earned. But the lawyer wasn't done. He kept pushing, twisting my words, trying to turn everything around so that I was the one at fault. I could feel the frustration building inside me, but I couldn't let it show. Not yet. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, to remind myself of why I was here. I had to stay focused. This wasn't just about winning. This was about showing them, showing the world, that I had been treated unfairly, and that I wasn't going to let anyone get away with it. Not anymore. The break in the hearing came too soon, but it gave me a moment to breathe. I stepped into the hallway, walking briskly toward the restroom. As I washed my face with cold water, I stared at myself in the mirror, willing myself to stay strong. Don't back down, I whispered to myself. This is your fight. You've earned it. When I returned to the courtroom, I was ready. The anger was still there, but it wasn't clouding my judgment anymore. The lawyer's tactics were obvious now. He was trying to manipulate the situation, to play me like a pawn. But I wasn't going to let him. Not this time. The hearing continued, and as it progressed, I could feel the tide beginning to shift. The more I listened, the more I realized that I wasn't the only one with a story to tell. My parents had their own dirty secrets. They had manipulated me for years, used me for my resources, and now they were trying to cut me out of my own inheritance. The lawyer presented some evidence, a few documents that suggested I had willingly given money to my parents. But as he went through them, I saw something that made my stomach drop. One of the transfers, which I had thought was a loan, was labeled as a gift. A gift. It wasn't just a technicality, it was a lie. And that lie, I knew, would be the nail in their coffin. It felt like a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The truth was starting to surface, and it was becoming clearer by the second. My parents couldn't hide behind their lies forever. The court recessed, and the weight of everything hit me all at once. I sat there, alone in the quiet of the courtroom, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. This battle was far from over, but I could see the path forward now. I was no longer just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my dignity, my respect, and my place in the world. As the judge came back in, I stood up straight. I could feel the power shifting in my favor, just a little, but enough to know that I was on the right side of this fight. The hearing is adjourned, the judge announced. We will reconvene in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The battle was just beginning. But for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. The meeting was set. The moment I had been dreading, but also the moment I knew I needed to face. I walked into the quiet room in the legal office with my heart pounding in my chest, trying to keep the wave of emotions under control. My parents were there, seated across from me, their faces as cold as the room we were in. The air between us was thick with tension, thick with everything that had been left unsaid for years. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the lies, the manipulation, the years of me giving everything for a family that never truly cared about me. Delilah, my mother began, her voice soft, almost apologetic, as if trying to draw me in with warmth that felt too fake. We never wanted it to come to this. We did what we thought was best. This is all out of love. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. The audacity. She was trying to manipulate me, trying to twist everything around. My mind screamed at me to speak, to tell her how I saw through her lies. But I stayed silent, not giving her the satisfaction of seeing me break. You're not fooling me, I said, keeping my voice steady, though my fists clenched at my sides. I see what you're doing. You're not here to apologize. You're here to make me feel guilty for wanting what's rightfully mine. My mother's face flickered for a moment, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. I'm sorry you feel that way. You've been a good daughter, but this is complicated. It's not complicated, I shot back, my voice louder now. You've been using me. You've used me for years. I've worked myself to the bone, paid bills, made home improvements, and you treated me like I was just supposed to do it all for free. Where was the love then? My father, as usual, remained silent, looking anywhere but at me. The coward who had let her do all of this without ever stepping in to stop it. Delilah, you're making this harder than it has to be, my mother said, her voice rising slightly in frustration. You'll always be part of this family. We did what we thought was best. I wanted to scream, to tell her how wrong she was, to let her know that everything they'd said and done to me was a lie. But I stayed calm, focusing on the proof I had. You want to talk about what's best? I asked, leaning forward slightly. Then explain this. I pulled out the folder I'd been keeping, the one full of receipts and bank statements, proof of my financial contributions to the house. I handed the folder across the table to her. Explain why I have transfer records of payments to you and Dad. And why they were labeled as gifts, when you promised me they were loans that would be repaid. Her face flushed, and I could see the panic in her eyes. For the first time in years, I could see the cracks in her facade. Delilah, I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, reaching for the folder, but not opening it. Those were just temporary things, small things. You know that. No, I said firmly, shaking my head. You told me it was temporary, that things would get better. That you'd pay me back. But it never happened. I've been paying for this house for years, and you never acknowledged it. Never once said thank you, never once said that I'd have a stake in it. The words came out faster now, fueled by years of frustration, years of being dismissed, years of being treated like nothing more than a tool for their benefit. I wasn't the naive daughter anymore. I wasn't the person they thought they could control with a smile and a few empty words. Why didn't you just tell me the truth? I demanded, staring directly at my mother. Why didn't you just admit that you were using me? She looked away then, unable to meet my eyes. For a moment, the silence between us was deafening. My father remained mute, his eyes still trained on the table, as if this wasn't even his fight. You've always been the one to help us, my mother said, finally meeting my gaze. Her voice was quieter now, almost pitiful. We didn't want you to feel like you had to. We wanted you to feel like you were part of the family. But I never was, I spat, the words cutting through the air. You used me. I've been nothing but a pawn in your game, a tool to help you build your life. And now you want me to just walk away without getting what's mine. Her silence told me everything I needed to know. She had no answer. The flashback hit me then, those years of helping, paying bills, fixing things around the house, believing all the while that it was temporary. Believing that one day, when things got better, when their financial situation improved, they would repay me. But that moment, when my mother had promised me that she would pay me back, when things got better, was just a lie. A hollow promise meant to keep me quiet, meant to keep me in line. I closed my eyes for a moment, reliving that conversation from years ago, sitting at the kitchen table, my mother's words ringing in my ears. This is just for now, Delilah. I'll pay you back when things get better. She had never intended to repay me. That was the truth. And it wasn't just the money, it was everything. They had never seen me as their equal. I was nothing more than a tool for their convenience. Why didn't you ever tell me the truth? I asked again, more softly this time. Why did you make me believe all of this was normal? Her response was weak, her defenses crumbling. I thought I was doing what was best for you. Best for me? I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. All you've ever done is manipulate me, use me. I've been nothing but your servant. The shift in the room was palpable. I was no longer the victim. I was no longer the one begging for answers. I was the one asking the questions now. I looked at her one last time before I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I was done with the lies. I'm taking this to court. I'm not backing down. You'll see that I was right all along. I walked out of the room, leaving them behind. The confrontation had been ugly, but it had been necessary. And as I stepped into the hallway, my phone rang. Amanda, my sister. I knew what was coming, but I answered anyway. Delilah, she said, her voice trembling. Mom and Dad are upset. Can't you just let this go? It's tearing the family apart. I can't, I said, feeling the frustration build again. They used me, and they're still trying to. Please, Delilah, she said, her voice cracking. Come home. Forgive them. This isn't worth it. I slammed the phone down, the echo of my mother's false apologies still ringing in my ears. Amanda wasn't on my side. She never had been. And now, more than ever, I knew I was alone in this fight. I was going to fight for what was mine, no matter the cost. The morning of the hearing felt different. The usual weight of anxiety, now mixed with a growing sense of purpose, pressed down on me. It wasn't just another day, this was the moment that would define everything. The legal battle had dragged on for weeks, but this, today, was the culmination. I could feel the impending pressure as I sat at my kitchen table, the papers in front of me a reminder of how far I'd come. And yet, the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. I was going to see them again. My parents, sitting across the courtroom, probably trying to come up with their own way to manipulate the situation. I had prepared myself for this, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. Not after everything. As I rifled through the case files, organizing them one last time, my phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. I opened it without hesitation. New evidence found. Check your email. I clicked over, and there it was, an email thread between my mother and father. Their discussion was as damning as it was chilling. They talked openly about their plans to disinherit me, how they'd done everything they could to make me feel like an outsider, and how they would strip me of any claim to what I had rightfully earned. The words on the screen hit me like a gut punch, but as I read them, a fierce surge of energy took over me. This was the proof I needed. This was the smoking gun that would make everything clear to the court. The years of manipulation, the deceit, the lies, they were all right there. They thought they could keep me in the dark, but I had the evidence now. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore, I was fighting for my dignity, my rights, and for everything they had taken from me. I stared at the screen for a moment, allowing the gravity of what I had just discovered to sink in. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about control. It always had been. I wasn't going to let them win. Not now. The phone buzzed again. My lawyer was calling this time. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Delilah, this could change everything, he said, his tone serious. We've got what we need. This is the evidence that can shift the case in our favor. But we need to be strategic. This is just the beginning. I took a deep breath. I'm ready, I said, my voice firm. Let's finish this. After hanging up, I took a moment to compose myself. The stakes had never been higher. This battle wasn't just for a house, it was for everything I had ever been made to believe about my family. They had used me, manipulated me, made me feel like I was nothing more than a tool to get what they wanted. But now, the game had changed. The next step was clear. I had to focus. I had to be precise. And I had to be cold, calculating, just like they had been all these years. I went to my mirror and stood there for a few moments, staring at myself. I had been broken before. I had felt helpless and lost. But not anymore. I wasn't just fighting for what was mine, I was fighting for my very soul. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. The next few days passed in a blur of legal meetings and last-minute preparations. The court hearing was days away, and I was more focused than ever. My lawyer and I spent hours finalizing our strategy. We would present the evidence, the email thread, the receipts, the testimony, and expose their lies. But we also needed to be prepared for the emotional toll it would take on me. The defense would attack my credibility. They would try to paint me as the ungrateful daughter who had let her emotions cloud her judgment. I had prepared myself for this. It was going to be hard, but I knew I couldn't afford to let them see my vulnerability. I practiced in front of the mirror, rehearsing my responses. Stay calm, Delilah, I whispered to myself, this is your moment. Then, just when I thought I couldn't handle any more surprises, one came. I was at a coffee shop, having a quiet moment to collect my thoughts, when I saw her, Amanda. My sister. She stood across the table, offering me a hesitant smile. I hadn't seen her in months, not since everything had spiraled. Delilah, she said, her voice tentative, as if unsure of how to approach me. I've been following everything that's been happening. I want to help. I stared at her, unsure of how to respond. Was this genuine? Was she offering me help, or was she just another piece of the puzzle I didn't need? I have connections, Amanda continued. People who know the legal system. I can help you, Delilah. I don't want to see you go through this alone. I wasn't sure what to think. My sister had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. And now, she was offering me help? A part of me wanted to trust her, to believe that she cared, but the other part, the part that had been betrayed so many times, remained cautious. I appreciate it, Amanda, I said slowly. But I don't know if I can trust you. She looked hurt, but she didn't press me further. I just want what's best for you. I didn't know what to make of her words, but I knew one thing: she wasn't going to stand in my way. If I was going to win this battle, it was going to be on my terms, with or without her. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the tension was palpable. I could feel the weight of the moment as I walked into the courthouse. My parents were there, sitting across the room. My father's cold, emotionless gaze locked onto mine. My mother looked almost too perfect, put together, polished, as if everything was fine. But I knew the truth. And today, the truth was going to come to light. As the judge called the case to order, I took my seat, my heart racing. My lawyer sat beside me, giving me a reassuring look. Then, it happened. My father stood up, trying to appeal to my emotions. Delilah, he said, his voice filled with false sympathy. We can settle this. We don't need to go through with the trial. Let's work this out privately. Think of the family. I felt a knot in my stomach, the old emotional ties pulling at me. But I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to back down. No, I said, my voice steady. I'm not giving up. Not now. Not after everything you've done. The courtroom fell silent. The judge looked from me to my father, but my resolve was already set. The cross-examination began, and I stepped onto the stand. My father's lawyer tried to discredit me, questioning my emotional state, trying to make me look unstable. But I was ready. I was ready for everything they threw at me. I told the truth. I spoke about the sacrifices, the manipulation, the lies. I didn't let my emotions take control, even when my mother's accusations stung. She called me ungrateful, tried to paint me as the villain. But I held my ground. By the time I finished, I could feel the eyes of the jury on me, judging me, listening to every word. I had told them my story. And it was undeniable. The court proceedings came to a close. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of the moment. It was done. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The jury was deliberating. The outcome was still unknown. As the courtroom doors closed behind me, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I had done everything I could. Now, all I could do was wait. And no matter what happened, I knew I had won. I sat in my apartment, the familiar hum of the city outside my window, but the stillness inside was overwhelming. The past few weeks had taken everything out of me, physically, emotionally, mentally. The weight of the legal battle hung over me like a constant shadow, but as I sat there, staring out at the world, something shifted. I had come this far. I couldn't stop now. The exhaustion weighed on my shoulders, but it wasn't just fatigue. It was the mental strain of fighting a battle that had drained so much from me. But the quiet moments before the next court session allowed me to breathe for a second. I thought about everything that had led up to this. The years of sacrifice, the years of silence, and now, the fight to break free from everything my parents had done to me. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. This was about reclaiming myself, my dignity, and my future. The phone buzzed on the table beside me, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered anyway. Delilah? The voice on the other end was familiar, but I wasn't sure at first. Then, recognition clicked. It was my cousin, Lydia. I've been following everything, she said, her voice cautious. I didn't know what to do, but I've got some information. Something you might want to hear. It's about your mom's former lawyer. I felt my pulse quicken. What do you mean? What's going on? I've been talking to some people who used to work with your mom's attorney. He made a statement about the house, about what your parents were doing behind the scenes. They were planning to disinherit you, and they've known about the ownership rights being altered for a while. It's all documented. I thought you should know. I froze. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. My parents had planned this from the start. The manipulation, the deceit, it was all laid out in front of me. It was exactly the kind of evidence I needed to shift the case in my favor. Thank you, Lydia, I whispered, my voice shaking. I didn't know what to feel. Relief? Anger? But mostly, it was determination. They weren't going to win this time. You've given me a chance to win. As I processed the information, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This wasn't just about the house, it was about taking back control. It was about proving that I had been right all along. The next day arrived quickly, and the court session was about to begin. The tension in the air was thick as I sat in the waiting room, reviewing my notes for the last time. I couldn't show any weakness. I had prepared for this, but today would test everything I had. The doors to the courtroom opened, and I stepped inside. My parents were already seated. My father's cold eyes met mine, while my mother, who had once been my ally, now looked at me with something different in her eyes, guilt, perhaps, or fear. But I couldn't afford to care. I sat down across from them, the opposing lawyer immediately beginning his attack. Delilah Monroe, a woman scorned, he began, his voice oozing with contempt. This case isn't about justice. It's about spite. She's simply seeking to destroy her family. I sat still, clenching my fists beneath the table. The accusation stung, but I had to remain calm. I reminded myself of the truth I had in my corner, the evidence. The email thread, the financial records. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. The defense lawyer tried to poke holes in my character, questioning my emotional state and even suggesting that my claims were purely based on sentiment, not solid proof. But I held my ground, every word he threw at me just fuel to the fire burning inside me. I wasn't going to let them rewrite the truth. Not today. Then came the moment. My lawyer brought forward the new evidence, an email thread between my parents discussing their plans to disinherit me, and it was all right there. The defense attorney stammered, momentarily caught off guard. The courtroom fell silent. This changes everything, my lawyer said, looking toward the jury. This proves that Delilah was targeted from the very beginning. Her parents knew what they were doing. A small sense of triumph flickered inside me, but I didn't let myself get distracted. This wasn't the end. It was just a moment in the larger battle. After the session, I stepped out of the courtroom, the weight of what had just happened starting to settle in. I felt alive, but not in the way I'd hoped. The emotional toll of the trial was starting to show, and I needed to find a way to hold it together. As I walked down the hallway, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. It was my mother. "Delilah, wait," she called softly, her voice cracking. I turned to face her, my heart a storm of emotions. I wasn't ready for this. Not now. "I'm sorry, Delilah," she said, her words coming out in a rush. "I've made so many mistakes. I never meant for things to get this bad. Please, let's stop this. We're family. We can fix this. I can't lose you." I could feel the tears threatening to fall. Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit. But I had heard them before. This was the same manipulation she'd used for years, pretending to care, pretending to want what was best for me. But I knew better now. "I'm done listening to your apologies, Mom," I said, my voice steady, though every part of me wanted to break. "You've had your chance. And you've made your choices." I turned away, not giving her the satisfaction of seeing me falter. My heart was heavy, but my resolve was stronger than it had ever been. Later that day, I sat with my lawyer again, reviewing the progress. He was impressed with the direction things were going, but we both knew this was only the beginning. The case was far from over, and the defense would undoubtedly come at me with everything they had. But I wasn't backing down. "You've got this, Delilah," my lawyer said, his voice filled with reassurance. "We just need to stay on the offensive. Don't let up now." I nodded, taking a deep breath. I felt the weight of the battle in my chest, but I also felt something else, hope. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a chance. I wasn't fighting for my family anymore. I was fighting for me. The final day of the trial arrived. I was ready. I had prepared for this moment, and I was going to make sure that I didn't back down. The defense would try to tear me apart emotionally, but I wasn't going to let them. I was done being their punching bag. Just as I was about to take the stand, my mother offered one last attempt to settle the case. "Delilah," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, let's put this behind us. We can settle this. You don't need to do this." For a moment, I felt the familiar tug at my heart. The part of me that wanted to forgive, to end the pain. But I couldn't. I couldn't let her manipulate me again. No, I said firmly, looking her in the eye. I'm not taking the settlement. This isn't about money. This is about justice. And I won't stop until I get it. The courtroom fell silent. I had made my choice. And there was no turning back. With my final testimony delivered, the jury left to deliberate. I sat alone in the quiet room, my hands trembling. I didn't know what the verdict would be, but I had done everything I could. I had fought. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I knew the decision was out of my hands now. But no matter what happened, I had broken free. The days leading up to the final court session felt like an eternity. Every waking moment, I was buried in legal papers, emails, and endless hours of preparation. The weight of everything that had brought me here, the betrayals, the lies, the decades of manipulation, had worn me thin, but I couldn't let it break me now. Not after everything I had fought for. I was so close to the end. I sat alone in my apartment that evening, the quiet of the city outside a stark contrast to the storm raging in my mind. I needed to calm myself, to gather the strength to face my mother and the defense one last time. This wasn't just about the house anymore, it was about my life, my freedom. The personal sacrifices, the years I spent in silence, all of it had led to this point. Then, my phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting another email or a message from my lawyer, but instead, it was a letter, an envelope that had no return address. My heart skipped a beat. Slowly, I opened it, my hands shaking slightly. Inside was a letter, folded neatly. And as I began to read, the weight of the words hit me like a freight train. It was from an anonymous source, and it contained a diary entry from my mother, one I had never seen before. It spoke of things my parents had done in secret, details of the family's past that I had never known. Hidden truths, buried lies, and the very foundation of their manipulations. The letter ended with a single sentence: "This could change everything." I sat back, staring at the paper, my mind racing. This was the breakthrough I needed. This document, this diary entry, could expose everything: my mother's lies, their secrets, and their plans to control me forever. The courtroom session was only days away, but now, I had the weapon I needed to end this. I felt a surge of hope, but it was mixed with exhaustion. This battle had drained me more than I had ever realized. But there was no turning back now. The courtroom buzzed with tension as I walked in, holding the letter tightly in my hand. I had come prepared. My mother's lawyer shot me a cold glance, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. This was the moment that would define everything. I handed the letter to my lawyer, who stood up and presented it to the judge. As we did, I could feel the eyes of the jury on me. I was standing on the precipice, and I wouldn't allow myself to look down. "My client submits new evidence," my lawyer said, his voice steady and unwavering. "A letter that sheds light on the true nature of this case, written by the defendant herself. This letter contradicts the narrative presented by the defense and proves the full extent of the manipulation Delilah has been subjected to." I watched as my mother's lawyer's face faltered. For the first time in this entire battle, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. But that didn't last long. With practiced calm, he stood up, determined to regain control. "Objection, Your Honor," he said, voice rising. "This is nothing more than an emotional ploy, an attempt to sway the jury's opinion. We can't simply rely on a diary entry." But the damage was done. The letter had shifted the tide. The jury was paying attention now. My mother's attorney tried to twist the narrative, attempting to bring up a past mistake of mine, suggesting that my emotional instability would jeopardize my case. But I stood my ground, feeling the adrenaline surge through me. I would not let them turn this around. I wouldn't let them paint me as the villain when it was them who had manipulated and betrayed me for years. "I'm here to seek justice, not revenge," I said, my voice steady but fierce. "This isn't about my emotions or past mistakes. This is about what's right." My lawyer pressed on, dismantling their attempts to distract the jury. The truth was now laid bare, and there was no denying it. Just as I thought I had the upper hand, a shockwave hit. An unexpected figure appeared in the courtroom, my cousin, Michael, the one person who had always been loyal to my mother. His presence was a punch to the gut. He walked straight up to the defense table, his face stern. He took the stand, and my heart sank. "Delilah," he began, his voice cool and steady, "has always been after revenge. She's not interested in the truth, just in taking what's hers. She wants the house, the money, and nothing more. The words cut through me like a knife. Betrayal. My own blood, siding with them. But then, Michael dropped a bombshell. My father, he said, his voice cracking slightly, had a trust. One that was supposed to protect Delilah. But her mother made sure it stayed hidden. She knew about it. All these years, your father could have saved you, Delilah. But they kept it from you. I froze. I had no idea. The trust. All this time, my father had set something up for me, something that could have protected me from this entire mess. I felt the weight of everything shift. My entire perception of the battle I'd been fighting changed. The fight wasn't just about the house, it was about the legacy my father had left me, a legacy they had tried to steal. The courtroom was silent as Michael's words settled in. The shock of the revelation hit me hard. But then, as if everything had been building to this moment, my lawyer stood up, presenting the final piece of evidence, my father's signed will. The will that clearly stated I was entitled to the house and all of the assets tied to the trust. I looked at my mother, who had been sitting in her seat, silent and trembling. Her empire was crumbling before her eyes. This was the moment I had fought for. I felt a surge of vindication, mixed with disbelief. After everything, after all the pain, the sacrifice, and the years of manipulation, I was finally going to get what was rightfully mine. But even in this moment of victory, I couldn't help but feel the sorrow of what had been lost. The family I had known was gone, replaced by something unrecognizable. As the jury went into deliberation, the room became eerily quiet. The weight of the final moments pressed on me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment of truth. My mother's legal team made one last-ditch attempt to sway the jury. They tried to paint me as a vengeful daughter who was destroying her family for the sake of money. But I didn't flinch. I knew the truth. And then, the jury returned. The judge looked at me, his voice calm but firm. The jury has reached a verdict. I stood tall, my heart racing. My fate was in their hands now. The judge's voice rang out, in favor of Delilah Monroe. You are entitled to half of the property and all the assets in your father's trust. Relief washed over me. It was over. The years of pain, the battle, the fight, finally, it was done. As I walked out of the courtroom, a reporter approached me. Delilah, what's next for you? He asked. I stopped and looked at him, my expression steady. I won the battle, I said, my voice calm, but the war isn't over. There's still so much to uncover. And I'm not done yet. The courthouse parking lot was quieter than it had been all through the trial. The weight of the past few months hung heavy on me as I walked away, victory in hand but a hollow feeling in my chest. I had won the case, yes, but at what cost? My family, my history, everything I thought I knew was shattered. The fight had been long and exhausting, and while I had fought for what was mine, I couldn't ignore the toll it had taken on me. I had hoped that winning would feel like liberation, but as the doors of the courthouse closed behind me, it felt more like the beginning of something even harder. Then my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. The name that flashed across it stopped me in my tracks, my mother. For a moment, I didn't know what to think. After all the battles, the accusations, the court sessions where we barely exchanged more than glares, why now? Why this? I hesitated before answering, already bracing myself for the manipulations I knew were coming. Delilah, her voice came through, smooth but laced with something that didn't sit right. I think it's time we talk. I stood there, still as stone, feeling a mixture of disbelief and anger surge through me. The audacity. After everything she had done, after trying to control me my entire life, now she wanted peace? She wanted to settle things. You know where to find me, I replied, my voice colder than I intended. But don't expect me to come crawling back. Let's meet, she urged, her voice insistent but oddly calm. It's time to end this. For good. I hung up before she could say more, a swirl of emotions churning inside me. I couldn't let this moment slip by. I had to confront her, one last time. I would not let her rewrite the story. I arrived at the restaurant where my mother had suggested. It was upscale, the kind of place she always favored, with its muted lighting and polished wood floors. It was quiet, almost intimate, but I could feel the tension hanging in the air, thick as smoke. She was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking almost regal in her composure. But I knew better now. Underneath that perfect veneer was the same woman who had lied, manipulated, and tried to control me my entire life. She looked up when I approached, her eyes flickering with something between relief and expectation. "Delilah," she said softly, her tone almost soothing. "I'm glad you came." I sat down across from her, keeping my distance. The table felt like a chasm between us, and there was no way I would let her close the gap again. "Let's get this over with," I said, meeting her gaze. "What's this about, Mother?" She smiled, a practiced, thin smile. "I want to offer you a deal. We end this fight right now. You drop the case, and I'll give you half of everything, the property, everything that's rightfully yours. We'll walk away, and you won't have to deal with this any longer." Her words were smooth, the offer tempting. But there was something else in her voice, a hint of desperation buried under layers of calm. She wasn't offering this out of love. This was a last-ditch attempt to regain control, to salvage what little power she had left. "You think I'm stupid?" I said, barely keeping the anger in check. "You think I'm going to just walk away from this after everything? After you tried to steal everything from me?" "Delilah," she began, her voice changing, becoming softer, more familiar. "I've sacrificed so much for this family. All I want is for you to be happy. This fight, it's tearing us apart. Please, let's move on. Let's start fresh. You don't have to carry this burden." It was a tactic I knew all too well. She wasn't speaking from a place of understanding. She was speaking from a place of control, trying to twist my feelings into submission. I felt the heat rise in me. "You're not fooling me. You've spent my entire life manipulating me, using guilt and your false promises to get what you wanted. But I'm done. I don't need your money, your pity, or your lies." She recoiled, her calm mask cracking for just a moment. It was a glimpse of the woman who had spent years controlling me, and I hated her for it. As the conversation continued, a realization struck me hard, like a fist to the gut. She wasn't offering me a deal out of kindness or concern. It was a final power play, a last-ditch effort to keep me under her thumb. The truth came flooding back to me, the countless times she had undermined my success, sabotaged my happiness, and manipulated the story to keep me from moving forward. She was trying to fix everything, not because she cared about me, but because she wanted to maintain control. It wasn't love. It never was. It was control, pure and simple. A rush of anger surged through me, but this time, it wasn't helpless anger. It was the kind of anger that came with clarity. The realization that I had been fighting for my life, for my freedom, all along. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor as I pushed it back. "I'm done," I said, my voice sharp. "I'm done being your pawn. I'm not walking away from this. Not now, not ever." I turned on my heel and walked out of the restaurant, my heart pounding in my chest. The door swung open behind me, but I didn't look back. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. As I stepped outside, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But then, just as I thought I had broken free, I was met with an unexpected sight. My mother's legal team stood outside the restaurant, waiting. They must have been watching from inside. "Delilah," one of them said, stepping forward with a smug look on his face, "are you sure about this? You know what happens if you go through with this." They tried to intimidate me, using my vulnerabilities against me. They tried to remind me of the legal battles still ahead, the mess I was about to make. But it didn't matter anymore. Before I could say anything, I heard a familiar voice. "Step away from her," my lawyer said, walking towards me with confidence. "We have all the evidence we need, and if you continue to harass my client, we'll expose everything you've been hiding." The legal team's demeanor shifted instantly. They realized they no longer held the power. Their threats fell silent as my lawyer stood beside me, his presence a shield. I stood tall, feeling a rush of victory. I had taken control. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one calling the shots. As I walked away, the sound of my phone vibrating interrupted my thoughts. I checked the screen, an unknown number. I hesitated for a second, then answered. "Delilah?" The voice on the other end was shaky. "I have something you need to know. It's about your father's will." My breath caught in my chest. What could it be now? Standing in front of the family estate, I felt the weight of everything I had fought for. The old house loomed in front of me, its tall windows casting long shadows across the lawn. This place, once my sanctuary, had become a symbol of everything I had lost. The battles with my parents, the deceit, the constant manipulation, it all tied back to this estate, to this family name. But now, standing here, I realized something important: the past was no longer my future. The victory in the courtroom had been hard-earned, but what came next? It wasn't enough to simply walk away. I had to decide what to do with my father's legacy, with the estate. Should I sell everything, sever the last tie to my past, and start anew? Or should I keep some part of it, a reminder of my father's true wishes, the man I had tried so hard to hold onto through the years of darkness? My hand clenched around the papers in my pocket, the documents that had just finalized my claim. The legacy was mine, but the decision on how to honor it felt like a burden. I looked up at the towering structure before me, the wind rustling through the trees. The decision was mine to make, and for once, I felt the weight of it settle into my bones. But as the house stood silently before me, I was determined to take control of this moment, to create something meaningful from the ashes of my family's mistakes. Inside the house, I wandered through the familiar rooms, each one heavy with memories of a childhood filled with lies. In my father's study, the familiar scent of old leather and paper still lingered, but now it was a place of discovery. As I prepared to make my decision about the estate, something else caught my eye. A small, hidden journal, tucked behind some old legal files. I hadn't seen it before, not even when we were cleaning out my father's belongings. I opened the journal carefully, my fingers trembling slightly. The ink on the first page was faint, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My father's. As I flipped through the pages, a hidden truth slowly began to emerge. My mother had been more involved in the family's downfall than I could have imagined. The journal revealed how she had played a larger role in the manipulation of the estate, even more than I had initially realized. The lies, the cover-ups, they had all been her doing. A sharp breath escaped me as I read through the entries, the weight of my father's revelations crashing into me. This was the truth, and it was clear now: my mother had orchestrated more than just my pain. She had manipulated everything, even my father's intentions for the family. I couldn't ignore it. I had to confront her. I arranged to meet my mother at the family home, the very place where our relationship had been built on lies. She was waiting for me in the living room, sitting as calmly as she always did. But today, I wouldn't be intimidated. Today, I was the one who held the truth. "I know everything," I said, my voice steady but filled with the weight of the discovery. "The journal. Everything you've done, all the manipulation, it's all in here." Her face froze, the mask of composure cracking for a moment. "Delilah," she began, her voice pleading, "I did everything for this family. Everything. You can't understand the burden I carried. You're making a mistake." "Am I?" I stepped closer, standing tall in front of her. "You destroyed this family, and you tried to do the same to me. But I see you now. And I'm done letting you control me." She stood up, anger flashing in her eyes. "You don't know what it was like. You have no idea what I've sacrificed." I shook my head, disgust flooding me. "No, Mom. You've never sacrificed anything. You've only taken from everyone around you. And I won't be a part of it anymore." I left her standing there, her words lingering in the air like the last gasp of a dying relationship. It was over. The ties between us, the emotional manipulation, the years of betrayal, it was all gone. The mother I had once known was no longer the same woman who stood before me. The woman I saw now was a stranger. A woman who had used me, controlled me, and now, finally, had no more power over me. As I walked away from the family home, I felt a strange calmness settling in. The past was behind me. The toxic family dynamic, the expectations, the lies, it was all in the rearview mirror. But there was something else that called me forward. The decision I had made to donate part of the estate to charity, to use the money to create something meaningful in my father's name, felt right. It was the one thing I could do to honor his memory, the real him, the one I had fought so hard to remember. A few weeks later, I stood on the rooftop of my apartment, looking out at the city below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and orange. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was mine to shape. I had reclaimed my life, my independence, and my father's legacy. And I was determined to build something meaningful from it. As I stood there, a text came through from my lawyer. An offer had come in to expand the foundation, to take the work I was doing to a new level. It was the validation I had longed for. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about making a difference, about using my pain to help others. And for the first time, I felt like I was doing something worthwhile, something that mattered. But as I allowed myself a moment of peace, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Delilah, the voice on the other end said, "I have something you need to know. There's one more clause in your father's will that you need to see. It changes everything you thought you knew about your family's future." My heart skipped a beat. What could it be now?